The cathedral was glowing like something out of a dream. White lilies, candlelight, strings echoing softly down the marble aisles. Laya Hart, 6 months pregnant and radiant in a Dior silk gown, sat in the small sacristy beside St. Patrick's Cathedral. She pressed a trembling hand against her belly, whispering, "We're almost there, sweetheart." She believed this day would heal everything. The years of distance from her father, the loneliness of early pregnancy, the endless headlines about Adrien Vale's billion-dollar company. Her iPhone buzzed on the dressing table. Adrien's name appeared. Smiling, she answered softly, "Almost ready, love." But there was no response, only voices. A woman's laugh. Then Adrien's unmistakable tone, low and confident. "Relax, Sloan. The prenup traps her. Once she signs, the baby locks the brand image. Monday, the IPO goes live. You'll get your bonus." Lila froze. Her reflection blurred in the mirror as his words repeated, slicing through every illusion she'd built. Sloan. His PR director. The woman who'd always hovered too close in meetings. Lila's throat tightened. She tried to hang up, but her trembling finger missed the button. The phone slipped onto the vanity, still recording the call. "After tonight, she's just the image. You're the real deal, babe," Adrien said. The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel, it was surgical. Something inside Lila cracked, quiet but permanent. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The Tiffany engagement ring on her finger suddenly felt cold, heavy, meaningless. She didn't scream. She didn't faint. Instead, she opened her notes app and hit record again, instinct born of survival. She forwarded the audio to her email, labeled Proof, 3:45 p.m. Tears blurred her vision. Her child kicked once, as if reminding her, breathe. Lila reached for her phone again, scrolled to a number she hadn't dialed in years, and pressed call. The line clicked. A deep, steady voice answered, "Lila?" Her lips trembled. "Dad, I need you." A pause. Then, "Where are you?" "Cathedral. Now." William Hart, the father she'd pushed away after her mother's death, would be the last person she ever expected to see on her wedding day. But as the cathedral bells began to chime, Lila knew she had no one else who could stand against Adrien Vale's empire. Outside, guests arrived in black Mercedes and polished heels, unaware that behind the carved oak doors, the bride was listening to the ruins of her life. She rose slowly, wiped her tears, and whispered to her unborn child, "You're not going to see your mother beg. You're going to see her fight." The organ began to play. Lila squared her shoulders, lifted her veil, and stepped toward the door. Because before the wedding could start, justice was already on its way. Outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, Fifth Avenue shimmered under the late afternoon sun. The air was crisp, and the street buzzed with polished cars pulling up, Mercedes, Bentleys, and a single black S-Class that slipped quietly to the curb. Inside, guests murmured in excitement, unaware that the bride behind the carved oak doors was fighting to breathe. Lila sat alone in the sacristy, her hands clasped tightly together. The priest knocked softly. 5 minutes, my dear." She nodded, forcing a smile that broke as soon as the door closed. Her phone buzzed. One message. "On my way." She hadn't heard that voice in years, but she could still feel its steadiness through the words. William Hart. Her father. The man she once swore she'd never forgive for leaving her mother to raise her alone. But right now, he was the only person in the world who might understand the weight of power, contracts, and deceit. Moments later, the cathedral doors opened, and William stepped inside. Silver hair, navy suit perfectly tailored, the quiet authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice. His assistant, Gabriel Chen, followed closely, holding a sleek MacBook Pro and a black leather folder. Lila stood, her veil trembling. "You came." William looked at her, eyes softening for just a second. "You said you needed me. That's enough." She pressed play on her phone, letting him hear Adrien's voice. The betrayal, the arrogance, the transaction. William's expression didn't change much, but his jaw tightened. When the recording ended, he took a slow breath. "I warned you about men who build empires on other people's love," he said quietly. Lila wiped her eyes. "Please don't say I told you so. Not now." He nodded once. "I won't. But I will say this, you're not walking down that aisle as his victim." "What do you mean?" William pulled a thin Mont Blanc pen from his pocket and tapped the folder. "Gabriel, the liens." Gabriel opened the laptop, showing documents, supplier agreements, bridge loan covenants, and investor terms. "Mr. Vale's company, Vale Tech, is heavily leveraged against our firm's private equity line. Gabriel explained. If we call his covenants or file breach of ethics notice, his IPO freezes instantly. Lila blinked, confused. You own his lenders? William's lips curved in a faint, bitter smile. Indirectly. I've been watching him since you told me his name. For a long moment, Lila just stared at her father. He wasn't here to comfort her. He was here to fight, and for the first time she realized how powerful that kind of love could be. Dad, I don't want to humiliate him, she whispered. I just want it to end cleanly. William nodded. We'll do it precisely. No scandal, no screaming. You stay calm for the baby. I'll handle the noise. Outside, the organist began the prelude. The crowd stirred. Gabriel closed the laptop and handed William the folder. We can pause the ceremony legally if necessary, but if she stands up there and he lies again, one more provable falsehood, it becomes perjury on a public record. Lila looked from Gabriel to William. You want me to let him hang himself? William met her gaze. No, I want him to show the world who he really is. The door cracked open. The wedding planner peeked in, frantic. We're ready, Miss Hart. Lila nodded, her voice steady for the first time. So am I. William reached into his pocket, pulled out a small silver charm, St. Christopher, the same one she'd carried as a child. Your mother made me promise I'd give this to you on your wedding day, he said. I didn't think it would be like this. Lila's eyes glistened as he pinned it inside her bouquet. Thank you, Dad. He kissed her forehead gently. Walk tall, Lila. Let him think he's winning. He'll write his own downfall before the cake is cut. She exhaled, straightened her veil, and stepped toward the door. Because tonight wasn't just a wedding, it was the beginning of justice. The marble corridors of St. Patrick's felt colder now. Lila followed her father and Gabriel into a side vestry, the muted sound of violins echoing from the nave. Her pulse was steadying, but her mind spun with every word Adrien had said. She thought she had known love, but now she understood what her father meant by control disguised as care. William set the black leather folder on the small wooden table beneath a stained glass window. The soft colors of saints painted across his face made him look both angelic and ruthless. Gabriel, show her the structure, he said quietly. Gabriel opened his MacBook Pro and rotated it toward Lila. This is your fiancé's company, Vale Tech Holdings. Everything looks legitimate on the surface. Diversified portfolios, digital infrastructure, green energy initiatives. But here, he pointed to a section marked collateralized debt obligations, is where the trap sits. He borrowed against his own pre-IPO shares. The minute a material misrepresentation occurs, say, a lie in a public forum, the lenders have grounds to freeze all liquidity. William folded his arms. You heard what he said on the call. He was misrepresenting intent, value, and the nature of your marriage as part of corporate image management. That's fraud. Lila shook her head slowly. I don't want a courtroom war. Her father looked at her gently. You won't need one. Truth works faster than lawyers when the world is watching. The priest's assistant knocked again. They're seating the final guests. William glanced at his watch. We have 20 minutes, enough to turn his own arrogance into evidence. Gabriel's fingers flew over the keyboard. The ceremony microphones feed directly to the AV system at the plaza for the reception live stream. If he lies during his vows, the statement becomes publicly recorded. That's your proof. Lila blinked. You want me to let the wedding happen? Her father met her eyes. Yes, but this time, you control the narrative. You stand there, you look him in the eye, and you ask one question before you say your vows. Do you have anything to confess that could harm our family? If he lies, it's over. Cleanly, no scandal you started, just the truth he chose. Lila inhaled deeply, fighting the wave of nausea that came with adrenaline. What if he tells the truth? William's jaw tightened. Then he gives you closure, not victory. Either way, you win. The logic was surgical, terrifyingly calm. She watched her father command every second like he'd been waiting years for this moment, not out of vengeance, but to finally protect what he'd once failed to. Dad, she whispered, what happens after? After, he said, closing the folder. You walk away with your dignity, and I make sure he never hurts another woman like this. Gabriel handed Lila a silk handkerchief. Inside it was a small audio transmitter, slim as a pen cap. Aunt Nora will swap your bouquet before the photos, he said. This will pick up everything. The feed goes to Elise Monroe at the plaza, trusted friend, discreet. Lila nodded, clutching the handkerchief like a lifeline. "I can do this," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. William smiled faintly. "You have your mother's fire. Don't hide it this time." The bells outside began to toll. Guests turned in their pews. Lila looked in the mirror one last time. Her mascara was perfect, her veil smooth, her heart armor thick. She whispered to the reflection, "You're not a victim. You're a witness." Then she turned toward the aisle, her father beside her, Gabriel fading into the background like a shadow. And as the doors opened, Lila realized this wedding wasn't her downfall. It was the stage for her reckoning. The grand doors of St. Patrick's Cathedral swung open, and sunlight spilled across the marble floor like liquid gold. The music swelled, the organist playing canon in D, as 1,000 eyes turned toward the bride. For everyone else, it was a perfect wedding. For Laya Hart, it was an execution, wrapped in lace. Her arm tightened around her father's. William's face remained calm, but his grip was firm, grounding her. "Head high, sweetheart," he whispered. "Walk like you already won." Lila stepped forward. The gown shimmered with every slow movement, the silk catching the light from the stained glass above. She forced herself to breathe evenly, one hand brushing her bouquet, the one with the hidden transmitter buried beneath white roses. The faint vibration reassured her. It was working. At the altar, Adrien Vale looked every bit the billionaire groom, tailored Dior tuxedo, Cartier cufflinks gleaming, a Rolex peeking from his sleeve. Cameras flashed as he smiled, that same charming grin that had once made her believe he was good. Now she saw only polish over poison. The guests whispered as Lila approached. Some said she looked angelic. Others murmured about the glow of pregnancy beneath the gown. No one saw the steel behind her eyes. When she reached the altar, Adrien extended his hand. "You look perfect," he said softly, his tone rehearsed. She smiled faintly, her voice steady. "So do your numbers." He blinked, puzzled, but the priest began before he could respond. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union." Lila's heart thudded in rhythm with the organ. The entire ceremony was being streamed live to the massive ballroom at the plaza, where the reception would begin in less than an hour. Everything was in place. Elise Monroe at the AV booth, Gabriel ready to sync the cathedral's feed. Adrien kept glancing toward the cameras, subtly adjusting his cufflinks. His confidence was infuriating. Every smile, every glance was calculated for optics. As the priest reached the vows, the world seemed to narrow. Lila felt the baby shift gently inside her. Her father's earlier words echoed, "Let him show who he really is." "Adrien Vale," the priest began, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, until death do you part?" Adrien gazed at her, voice smooth, "I do." Applause rippled softly through the pews. The priest turned to her. "And do you, Laya Hart, take this man?" "Wait." The word rang out, quiet but firm. Gasps fluttered through the cathedral. Even the music faltered. Lila met Adrien's eyes, calm and unflinching. "Before I answer, Father, I just want to ask my fiancée one thing." The priest hesitated, unsure. Adrien's jaw twitched. "Lila, what are you doing?" She tilted her head slightly. "Is there anything you need to confess that could harm our family before we make this vow?" The silence was suffocating. You could hear a pin drop. Adrien laughed lightly, trying to regain control. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time for jokes." "Then say it," she pressed softly, "that there's nothing you're hiding." He stared at her, a flash of irritation flickering behind the smile. "Of course not." The priest cleared his throat awkwardly. "Very well, let us continue." But in the back pew, Gabriel marked the timestamp on his iPad and hit record confirm. William's eyes stayed fixed on Adrien, his expression the calm before a storm. Lila's chest tightened, but she smiled again, radiant for the cameras. She whispered so only Adrien could hear. "That's all I needed to know." And as the organ roared back to life, she felt her knees steady, her voice rise with the prayer, and her fear dissolve into focus. Because with one single lie at the altar, Adrien Vale had already sealed his own fate. The ceremony ended in a haze of applause and camera flashes. Lila smiled for the crowd, her fingers locked around Adrien's arm as they walked down the aisle together. The cathedral bells rang out, echoing across Fifth Avenue like a song for a victory that wasn't real. Every step felt like walking through glass. Outside, confetti fluttered like snow, landing on her veil. Photographers called their names. "Mr. and Mrs. Vale, look this way." Adrien waved with the easy charm of a man who believed he'd fooled the world. Lila turned her face toward the sun, hiding her tears beneath a practiced smile. Her father stood by the limousine, expression unreadable. When their eyes met, William gave a single nod. The plan was still in motion. In the back seat of the car, Adrien slid an arm around her shoulder. "You were amazing," he said, kissing her cheek. "You look like every magazine cover I've ever bought space on." Lila forced a small laugh. "I'm glad I fit the brand image." He didn't notice the edge in her tone. "After tonight, we're unstoppable. Tomorrow, I'll fly us to the Hamptons. You'll love the villa." She looked out the window instead. Central Park glided past, golden leaves scattering across the road. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, but her mind was racing. She replayed his answer at the altar. Of course not. That single lie had changed everything. At the cathedral's rear courtyard, William met Gabriel. "We have it?" Gabriel held up his tablet. Crystal clear. Both the question and his denial. William nodded. "Send it to Elise. Tell her to sync it with the reception feed." Back inside the limousine, Lila's hand rested on her belly. The baby kicked gently. She whispered, "You're safe, I promise." Adrien scrolled through messages on his iPhone, oblivious. Sloan had texted, "Smooth. Champagne later?" He smirked. "Investors are already posting congratulations." "That's nice," Leela said softly, voice distant. He glanced at her. "What's wrong?" She looked at him, eyes steady. "Just tired, it's a long day." He leaned back, unconcerned, scrolling again. Leela turned her head away, hiding the silent fury burning behind her calm. When they arrived at the Plaza Hotel, photographers lined the entrance, flashes sparking against the marble steps. Leela stepped out first, bouquet in hand, the transmitter hidden beneath white ribbon, still recording every breath. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and gold-trimmed glasses. The Tiffany blue decor matched her engagement ring. Waiters passed trays of champagne. A string quartet shifted to a soft jazz tune. Everything was perfect, on the surface. As guests mingled, Lila caught a glimpse of Sloan Mercer across the room, standing near the PR team. Their eyes met for a split second. Sloan's smile faltered. She turned away too quickly. Lila's pulse quickened, but she didn't look again. Her father's words echoed. "Stay calm for the baby. Let him show who he is." The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, our newlyweds' first toast." Adrien rose confidently, champagne flute in hand. "To Leela," he said, "the woman who makes me better every day." Polite applause followed. Cameras flashed again. Leela lifted her own glass. "To honesty," she said softly. Adrien chuckled, thinking it was a joke. "Always," he replied, raising his glass higher. But across the room in the AV booth, Elise Monroe pressed record, syncing the altar vow and the phone call into one continuous feed. William glanced at his daughter, his face calm but his eyes burning with quiet pride. Lila smiled faintly, the calm before a storm. Because tonight, the lies would stop pretending to be love. The reception glowed like a movie set. The plaza's grand ballroom shimmered in gold, its chandeliers spilling soft light over champagne flutes and white orchids. Guests clinked glasses, laughter rising beneath the gentle hum of a jazz trio. To everyone watching, it was the perfect billionaire wedding. To Laya Hart, it was the calm before the detonation. She sat at the head table beside Adrien, smiling on cue as the photographer circled. Her bouquet rested near her plate, wrapped in a satin ribbon that hid a small transmitter, one that recorded everything around her. The original bouquet was gone now, replaced moments earlier by Aunt Nora in a graceful sleight of hand that no one noticed. During the photos, Aunt Nora had leaned in, adjusting Lila's veil. "New flowers for new strength," she whispered, pressing the new bouquet into her hands. Lila had felt the difference immediately, the weight, the texture, and known that the plan was alive. At the table, Adrien leaned close. "You're quiet," he said, swirling his drink. "Just taking it in," she replied softly. "It's a lot." He smiled, too sure of himself. "It's everything we dreamed of, isn't it?" She looked at him and almost laughed. Everything you dreamed of, she thought. The control, the image, the headlines. He believed she was his trophy, his perfect accessory to parade before investors. "Excuse me," she said, rising slowly. "I need a minute." Adrien nodded, distracted by the congratulations from a tech investor at the next table. Lila slipped out of the ballroom, her heels silent on the marble floor. Aunt Nora waited near the restrooms, her expression full of worry. "How's your heart, sweetheart?" "Beating," Lila said with a weak smile. "That's something." Nora cupped her cheek. "You look just like your mother tonight, calm even when you're breaking inside." Lila blinked back tears. She'd hate this kind of wedding. "She'd love that you're strong," Nora said. "He doesn't know who he married." Lila inhaled deeply, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back didn't look broken, she looked ready. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. When she returned to the ballroom, William was at a corner table, speaking quietly with Gabriel. The two men gave a subtle nod as she passed, a silent check-in, a signal that everything was aligned. Elise Monroe, the event director, hovered near the AV booth, pretending to adjust lighting but really verifying the sync between the altar recording and the reception sound system. Adrien stood center floor now, glass raised. "Ladies and gentlemen, to my beautiful wife," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "She's the best decision I ever made." Laughter and applause filled the air. Lila rejoined him, standing at his side, eyes glistening but steady. "To honesty," she repeated softly, the same word she'd used before. He grinned, oblivious. "To us." As the toast ended, she felt the baby move again, a quiet, gentle nudge beneath her ribs. It grounded her, reminded her what she was fighting for. William caught her eye across the room. His face was pale, stern, but proud. Gabriel whispered something into his ear and slipped out toward the lobby, phone in hand. The first wave of data had just been transmitted. The phone call, the vow, the timestamps. The lender's representative would soon have everything. Adrien's hand brushed Lila's waist, possessive. "Smile," he murmured. "Investors are watching." She turned toward the cameras and smiled, not for them, not for him, but for the strength inside her that he never once believed she had. The jazz music softened. The chandeliers gleamed brighter. In that moment, surrounded by people who thought they were celebrating love, Lila felt strangely free. Because the switch was complete, one bouquet for another, one truth for a lifetime of lies. The plaza's grand ballroom gleamed like something out of a dream. Crystal chandeliers, white roses, and champagne towers glittering under golden light. The music was soft, elegant, expensive. Laya Hart walked among her guests with the poise of a woman who had everything. But beneath the silk and diamonds, her pulse thrummed like a warning bell. Every inch of the ballroom was a symbol of Adrien's world, carefully curated, flawlessly staged. The long tables gleamed with Tiffany blue linens, the scent of Dior Bois d'Argent candles filling the air. The city's elite filled every seat, investors, senators, celebrities, and socialites. To them, Adrien Vale was untouchable, a visionary CEO about to lead a $9 billion IPO. Lila was the fairy tale bride completing his empire. At least that's what they thought. She smiled politely, thanked guests, accepted compliments about the dress, and nodded through conversations she barely heard. Inside, her mind was counting beats, waiting for the precise moment her father would signal that the trap was locked. At the far end of the ballroom, William Hart sat at a quiet table with Gabriel Chen and Elise Monroe. He wasn't drinking, his water glass stayed untouched. He looked like any other older guest, but every move he made was deliberate. Elise, pretending to manage lighting cues, confirmed in a low voice, "The AV feed is live. The files are clean, everything syncs." William nodded. "Good. When he speaks, record the room's reaction too. Fear is valuable evidence." Across the ballroom, Adrien laughed loudly, his voice carrying above the crowd. He was magnetic when he wanted to be, hand on a senator's shoulder telling a joke to a Wall Street banker. The crowd ate it up. Cameras flashed. Reporters hovered near the back, ready for quotes about the wedding of the decade. Lila watched him from the corner of her eye, and for the first time, she didn't see the man she loved. She saw a salesman in a tuxedo, someone who could sell a lie with a smile. "Mrs. Vale, congratulations," a woman said beside her, snapping Lila out of her thoughts. "Thank you," Lila replied softly. Her voice was steady, elegant, practiced. She caught her reflection in the mirrored columns, her Dior gown, her calm expression, her hand resting protectively on her belly. To anyone else, she looked serene, but she could see the truth in her eyes, exhaustion, heartbreak, fury held under glass. Adrien approached, sliding an arm around her waist. "There you are," he said, tone charming for the cameras. "You disappeared." "Just needed air," she replied. Pregnant women don't handle crowds well. He smiled for the photographers. You're glowing, he said loudly. Everyone says so. Her lips curved faintly. That's the lighting. He laughed, missing the sharpness beneath her calm. William glanced at his watch. He leaned toward Gabriel. They'll toast soon. Be ready. Gabriel typed a quick message to Elise. Cue audio link. Trigger on father's signal. Lila's pulse jumped. She took another sip of water, reminding herself to breathe slowly. Stay calm for the baby. It's almost time. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our newlyweds to the dance floor for their first dance. Applause erupted. Adrien took her hand and led her under the chandeliers. As the music swelled, she followed his steps, her eyes fixed on him. The moment felt like déjà vu. Everything perfect, everything fake. He whispered in her ear, "Tomorrow, the world will know my name." She smiled up at him, the smile that used to mean love. "Oh, Adrien," she whispered softly, "the world already does." He grinned, not hearing the danger beneath her words. From across the ballroom, William watched his daughter spin under the golden lights, her gown flowing like a ghost of innocence. He turned to Elise. "When the music stops," he said evenly, "start the playback." Because before the night was over, this ballroom of glass would shatter. The music faded as the first dance ended, leaving a hush that shimmered across the ballroom. Laya Hart stepped back, her gown whispering across the marble as Adrien Vale took the microphone. He looked impossibly confident, his Dior tux crisp, his Rolex catching the chandelier's glow. He lifted his glass, that practiced billionaire smile radiating charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth as silk, "tonight isn't just a celebration of love. It's a celebration of partnership, of building something that lasts." Applause rippled. He turned toward Lila with a dazzling grin. "To my wife, the woman who makes me better, who keeps me grounded, to family, to future." The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back, a journalist from Forbes typed furiously, "The perfect quote from the perfect man." But Lila knew better. Every word was a performance, each sentence crafted like a pitch deck. She smiled on cue, raising her flute of champagne. Her hand trembled slightly, but she hit it with poise. Across the ballroom, William Hart leaned forward at his table, the faintest flicker in his eyes. "He's grandstanding," he murmured to Gabriel. "Good," Gabriel replied quietly, fingers flying over the MacBook keyboard. "The AV feed is synced. Elise has the files ready. One push and the world hears everything." William nodded. "Not yet. Let him dig the hole himself," Adrien continued, voice brimming with confidence. "You know," he said, turning to face his guests, "success means nothing without loyalty, without trust." He let the words hang in the air, smug and ironic. "And tonight I've never felt more grateful for both." Lila felt her heart twist. The audacity of him, to speak of loyalty while his mistress texted him under the same roof. She saw Sloane Mercer at the PR table, pretending to check her phone, her expression tight. Adrien lifted his glass again. "To my wife," he said warmly. "To honesty," Lila answered, her voice soft but clear through the mic. The room went quiet for a second, just long enough for her words to land. Then polite laughter. Adrien chuckled, brushing it off. "To honesty?" he echoed. From the AV booth, Elise glanced at William. He gave the smallest nod. She pressed a single button. The ballroom speakers hummed faintly. Then, faint but unmistakable, Adrien's voice filled the air, recorded from earlier that day. "Relax, Sloane. The prenup traps her. Once she signs, the baby locks the brand image." The laughter stopped. Heads turned. The room froze. Adrien's smile faltered. What is that?" Gasps spread like wildfire. Lila stood perfectly still, her expression unreadable. The recording continued, every syllable clear. "After tonight, she's just the image. You're the real deal, babe." The guests began whispering. Someone dropped a glass. Sloane went pale, clutching her purse. Adrien lunged toward the AV booth. "Turn that off!" But security, pre-briefed by William, stepped in front of him. William rose calmly from his chair, his presence commanding. "A toast to honesty indeed," he said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Adrien's face flushed red. "You set me up," Lila finally spoke, her voice calm but trembling at the edges. "No, Adrien, you set yourself up." The recording ended, replaced by silence so sharp it hurt. Reporters at the back were already live tweeting, phones raised, flashes blinding. Adrien turned to Lila, desperation in his eyes. "You don't understand?" "I understand enough," she said, her tone quiet, final. "You were never marrying me." You were branding me." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Don't," she said softly. "Not in front of our child." Her father joined her, standing between them, not as the overbearing parent she'd once resented, but as a silent shield. Cameras clicked wildly. The facade was collapsing, the perfect couple, the billion-dollar story. It was all ashes now. William looked at Adrien one last time. "You wanted headlines," he said coldly. "Now you have them." And as the ballroom erupted into chaos, Lila's heart finally stopped breaking. It started healing. The ballroom was no longer a celebration. It was a storm of gasps, flashing cameras, and whispers cutting through the air like glass. Adrien Vale stood frozen near the microphone, face drained of its confident glow. The crowd that had adored him minutes ago now stared with wide-eyed disbelief. Reporters whispered into their phones. His investors, once smiling in admiration, began checking their messages with grim expressions. Laya Hart didn't move. She stood still beneath the chandeliers, her veil catching the light, her fingers resting protectively on her belly. The Tiffany blue decor, the music, the champagne, all of it had become background noise. Her entire world was a pulse of silence and resolve. Across the room, William Hart motioned to Gabriel Chen. "Now," he said quietly. Gabriel opened his leather portfolio and pulled out a sealed white envelope. A hotel courier, dressed in the plaza's livery, took it without a word and walked calmly through the chaos toward table 7, where the lead representative from Apex Capital, Vale Tech's primary lender, sat with his wife. The courier bowed slightly. "Delivery for Mr. Lang." Lang frowned, tearing it open. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note. "You may wish to hear this before Monday." He excused himself immediately, stepping out of the ballroom to a smaller side salon. His assistant followed, laptop already in hand. They plugged in the drive. The recording played. Adrien's phone call with Sloan, the vows at the altar, and finally the audio from the toast. Lang's expression hardened with each passing second. "Get compliance on the line," he ordered his assistant. "Now." Back in the ballroom, Adrien was unraveling. "This is fake," he shouted. "She edited it. It's AI." Lila didn't respond. Her calm only fueled his panic. "You set me up, Lila. You and your father. This is blackmail." William approached slowly, posture steady, voice low. "No, Adrien, this is truth. You just forgot the world records everything now." Sloan, pale as marble, began edging toward the exit, but a board member intercepted her. "Stay right here," he said coldly. "Legal will want a word." The air thickened with dread. Guests murmured, unsure whether to leave or stay. The sound of Lang's returning footsteps broke the tension. He approached Adrien, face like stone. "Mr. Vale," he said evenly, "Apex Capital will be suspending all IPO proceedings pending an internal review." Adrien blinked. "You can't do that." "I can," Lang said. "And I just did." Adrien's mask cracked completely. "You don't understand how this will look." Lang cut him off. "You're right. I do, and that's exactly why we're acting now." He turned to Lila. "Mrs. Vale," he said softly, "I'm sorry for what you've endured." Lila nodded in quiet acknowledgement. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. She simply exhaled, a weight lifting from her chest. Her father placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did well," he murmured. But inside, Lila was trembling. The adrenaline had begun to fade, leaving only exhaustion and the soft ache of everything she'd lost. She didn't want revenge anymore, just peace. Aunt Nora appeared beside her, worry etched across her face. "You need to rest, darling. Come with me." Lila nodded faintly. "Just a minute more." Adrien stood alone now, surrounded by silence. The crowd had turned against him, eyes filled with judgment where once there'd been admiration. Even Sloan refused to meet his gaze. He reached for Lila, desperate. "Lila, please, we can fix this." She looked at him one last time, tears brimming. "You can't fix what you never valued." Security escorted him toward a private corridor, cameras flashing like lightning. Lila's knees weakened, but Aunt Nora caught her just in time. "It's over," she whispered. Lila's voice cracked softly. "No, Aunt Nora. It's just beginning." Because truth had finally spoken. And tomorrow, the world would listen. The ballroom was still humming with whispers and chaos when the first security guards appeared near the velvet curtains. The guests had scattered into tight groups, muttering about lawsuits and stock crashes. Glasses clinked nervously. Someone was crying near the bar. The fairy tale reception had turned into a public reckoning. Laya Hart sat quietly at her table, her hand over her belly, steadying herself. Aunt Nora fanned her gently with a napkin, murmuring, "Breathe, sweetheart. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you crumble." Across the room, Adrien Vale was pacing like a caged animal, pulling at his cufflinks. His phone buzzed non-stop with messages from lawyers and board members. Every few seconds, he checked the screens flashing headlines. Billionaire CEO's wedding scandal erupts in Midtown. He glanced toward the PR table. "Sloan," he barked. "Fix this, now." Sloan Mercer looked up, her face pale under the ballroom lights. Her hands trembled around her phone. "Adrien, there's nothing to fix. The audio's everywhere. Twitter, CNBC, even Bloomberg picked it up." Adrien grabbed her wrist, lowering his voice but not his fury. "You're my PR director. Do your job. Tell them it's fake. Say it's AI manipulation, deepfake, anything." Sloan yanked her arm away. "Do you even hear yourself? You called me babe on that recording. You think they won't recognize your voice?" He froze. The air between them crackled with humiliation and fury. And that's when Elise Monroe, the plaza's event director, caught something on her earpiece. Her staffer whispered, "Miss Monroe, the side corridor. Sloan's talking to someone from the Post." Elise's eyes sharpened. "Record it." Meanwhile, Lila tried to calm her heartbeat. She could feel every pulse behind her ribs. Her father sat beside her, stoic and protective, his presence a wall against the chaos. "We'll leave soon," William murmured. "You've already won. There's no need to stay in the fire." Lila shook her head slightly. "No, Dad. I want to see how people react when truth walks in the room." A small commotion near the service corridor caught their attention. Sloan was whispering furiously into her phone, unaware that Elise's staffer was only a few feet away, quietly recording. "After tonight, he's finished," Sloan hissed. "I told him not to marry her yet. He got greedy. I'll leak what I have, emails, texts, even those wire transfers. He can't bury me too." She didn't notice the soft click of the recorder being stopped. Elise smiled faintly, already forwarding the file to Gabriel Chen's secure inbox. Across the ballroom, Adrien had cornered an investor, voice low but venomous. "This is temporary. My lawyers will kill the story in hours." But the investor only shook his head. "The lenders froze your line, Adrien. Your IPO's dead by morning." Adrien's confidence finally cracked. He turned toward Lila, eyes wide with something close to fear. She stood, steady and composed. "It's over," she said quietly. "Don't make it uglier." "You think this makes you righteous?" He spat. "You'll be nothing without my name." William stepped between them, calm as ever. "Her name was worth more before she met you." Reporters began pressing closer, flashes stinging their eyes. Lila shielded her face, not from shame, but from exhaustion. Aunt Nora whispered, "Let's go, darling." As they turned toward the exit, Gabriel intercepted them. "We have something new," he said, showing William his phone. Sloan's voice. She just incriminated herself. Everything's backed up. William's gaze hardened. "Send it to the board." In that moment, the music stopped completely. The ballroom was silent, a room full of powerful people realizing the empire they admired had just collapsed in front of them. Lila walked through the silence with her father beside her, each step measured, unbroken. Behind her, Adrien shouted her name once more, voice cracking with desperation. She didn't turn around, because the woman he once used as an accessory had just walked out as the author of his downfall. The chaos had thinned, but tension still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Some guests had fled, their couture heels clicking against the marble as they escaped scandal. Others stayed, driven by morbid curiosity, whispering into champagne glasses about what they'd just witnessed. Reporters lined the back wall, ready for one more headline. At the center of it all stood William Hart, silent and composed, one hand resting on his daughter's chair. His sharp eyes scanned the room, not with anger but precision. He waited for the moment when the noise would drop low enough that his voice could cut through it. He took a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter, then turned toward the DJ booth. "Stop the music, please." The room fell into uneasy silence. Lila looked up at her father, uncertain but trusting. Adrien Vale, red-faced and sweating, straightened his tuxedo jacket, trying to salvage control. "William, this isn't your event." William raised a hand, quiet but commanding. "You're right. It's not my event, but it is my daughter's life." A murmur spread. Cameras shifted, lenses glinting. He lifted his glass. "To my daughter," he began, voice calm, resonant. "To a woman who walked through humiliation and stood tall anyway. To someone who learned that strength isn't born from comfort, it's forged in betrayal. Gasps echoed softly. Adrien tried to interject, but William's gaze froze him mid-breath. And to honesty, William continued, tone sharpening, the one thing that can't be bought, traded, or faked. Tonight we saw the cost of lies. Now let's see the price of truth. He nodded toward the AV booth. Elise Monroe pressed a single key. The ballroom screens flickered to life. For a heartbeat, the room went dark. Then Adrien's voice boomed again, crystal clear. The prenup traps her. The baby locks the brand. Guests gasped anew. Sloane covered her mouth, face blanching. The playback continued, slicing through the air with surgical precision. After tonight, she's just the image. You're the real deal, babe. William didn't flinch. That, he said, voice echoing, is what my daughter almost married. Adrien's composure shattered. You had no right. I had every right, William interrupted, eyes burning with restrained fury. You built your fortune on deception. You thought my daughter was another asset. You underestimated her, and you underestimated me. The investors who remained exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "He's finished." William set down his glass and looked toward the lender's table. "Mr. Lang," he said smoothly, "I believe this concludes your due diligence." Lang nodded curtly. "We'll issue a formal freeze in writing, effective immediately." Adrien lunged forward. "You can't do this to me." William's tone turned to steel. "You did it to yourself." The ballroom erupted again, phones raised, flashes popping. Adrien turned to Lila, eyes wide with a flicker of something between rage and regret. "You'll regret this," he hissed, "when the money dries up, when the world turns on you." Lila rose slowly, her expression heartbreak and defiance woven together. "You were the world I was supposed to trust," she said softly, "and I watched it burn down before my eyes." Her father extended a hand to her. "It's time to go, sweetheart." But before they turned to leave, William looked back at Adrien one final time. "Here's the irony, son. You tried to own everything, and now you own nothing, not even your own story." The crowd parted as William and Lila walked toward the exit. The air was thick with silence, shame, and awe. As the doors closed behind them, William squeezed her hand gently. "Your mother would have been proud of you." Lila looked up at him, tears shimmering. "I finally understand her now," she whispered. Because in one toast, a father didn't just defend his daughter. He redeemed her story. The ballroom was a battlefield now, shattered illusions scattered like confetti. The air hummed with panic and embarrassment. Some guests avoided eye contact, others whispered into their phones, and the rest simply stared at Laya Hart as if she were a headline come to life. The orchestra had stopped playing. Only the faint buzz of news alerts filled the silence. Adrien Vale stood in the center, his face pale and eyes wild, looking nothing like the man who'd charmed the world hours earlier. "Turn that off," he roared, pointing toward the AV booth. "Shut it down, or I'll sue this entire hotel." Security, already briefed by Elise Monroe, moved in calm and silent, blocking his path. He was powerful, but not here, not anymore. Lila sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a glass of water. Aunt Nora rushed to her side, her voice trembling. "Breathe, honey." Slow, deep breaths. Her father, William Hart, crouched beside her, eyes soft with concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she whispered, though her pulse raced. "The baby's fine, just tired." He nodded, pulling out his phone. "Good, because now we finish this properly." He signaled to Gabriel Chen, who was already drafting emails at a nearby table. "Serve him." Gabriel rose, crisp and calm in his tailored suit. He approached Adrien, who was now surrounded by reporters, his charm slipping further with every camera flash. "Mr. Vale," Gabriel said evenly, handing him a sleek envelope, "you are hereby notified to preserve all digital communications and devices. Consider this an official spoliation notice. Any deletion of data from this moment will constitute obstruction." Adrien blinked in disbelief. "You can't be serious." William's voice carried clearly through the room. "Oh, we're very serious. You may still have lawyers, but you no longer have leverage." The crowd began murmuring louder now. Investors exchanged worried looks. A few discreetly slipped out the side doors, already drafting damage control statements. Lila's breathing steadied. She looked up at Adrien. This meant she once loved so deeply, now unraveling in front of the very people he'd spent his life trying to impress. "You said we were a team," she said softly. "But I was never on the roster, was I?" He turned toward her, face red with shame and anger. "You think you're better than me? You wouldn't have had a spotlight without me." Lila's voice stayed calm, her words cutting sharper than anger ever could. "You're right. I wouldn't have had this spotlight, but I never needed it. You did." The silence that followed was devastating. William motioned for Gabriel to escort her away, but Lila shook her head. "Not yet." Adrien tried to reach her, but a guard gently stepped between them. His voice cracked. "Lila, please. I made mistakes, but I can fix this." "You can't fix what you built on lies," she said, standing now, her posture unshaken. "You don't need to worry about me or this baby. We'll be fine. But you should start worrying about what's left of your empire." Her words hung heavy in the air, echoing louder than the recording had. William finally spoke again, his tone quiet but final. "We're done performing, Adrien. The show's over." He turned to Lila. "Let's go home." Elise Monroe stepped forward, offering a side exit. The staff had cleared a path to protect Lila from the reporters flooding the lobby. As they walked out, flashbulbs chased them, voices shouting questions. Was it a setup? Is the marriage annulled? Will you press charges? Lila didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was stronger than any statement. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around her like freedom. She looked up at the Manhattan skyline, sharp, brilliant, and untouchable. William slipped his coat over her shoulders. "You handled that with grace your mother would envy," he said softly. Lila smiled faintly, tears brimming. "She would have told me to run the moment I saw the red flags." He chuckled. "And you still would have tried to fix him." "Maybe," she said, "but not anymore." Because for the first time in years, Laya Hart wasn't surviving someone else's story. She was writing her own. The noise of the ballroom faded behind them as the heavy door closed. The air inside the plaza's private salon was still, almost sacred compared to the chaos outside. A chandelier glowed softly above a mahogany table, and the faint scent of roses lingered in the air. Laya Hart sank onto the velvet sofa, hands trembling slightly. Her body was exhausted, her heart more so. The adrenaline that had carried her through hours of shock and exposure was beginning to fade, leaving only fatigue and the dull ache of disbelief. William Hart stood near the window, watching Fifth Avenue glitter under the night sky. His reflection in the glass looked older, heavier. He turned when he heard her sigh. "You need rest," he said gently. "I shouldn't have let it go that far." She shook her head. "No, Dad, I needed it to end in the open. If I just walked away quietly, he would have buried the truth, and me with it." He nodded slowly, pride and sadness warring in his eyes. "You sound like your mother," he murmured. Before Lila could answer, the door opened. Gabriel Chen entered, followed by a hotel physician in a white coat. "We thought it best to check her vitals," Gabriel said. The doctor approached carefully, smiling warmly. "Just routine, Mrs. Hart. You've been under a lot of stress." Lila placed a hand protectively on her belly. "We're fine," she whispered, but she let him check anyway. Blood pressure normal. Pulse elevated but steady. The baby's heartbeat echoed softly from the Doppler monitor. Fast, strong, alive. William exhaled with relief. "Thank God." The doctor smiled. "She's resilient, but she needs quiet. No more confrontation tonight." He packed his bag and left discreetly. As the door closed, Gabriel pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. "There are options, Lila," he said gently. "You can file for annulment based on fraud. The recording alone is enough. You can also secure child support through trust arrangements if you wish." Lila looked at the folder without touching it. "I don't want his money," she said softly. "I just want peace." William sat across from her. "You can have both, but we'll do this the right way. Quietly, legally, with dignity." Gabriel nodded. "Then we'll proceed tomorrow morning. For tonight, no press statements, no posts, just rest." Layla leaned back, exhaustion closing in. Her mind drifted to memories. Her first date with Adrien at the River Cafe, his soft promises under the Brooklyn Bridge lights, the way he touched her belly and said, "Our future starts here." All lies, all rehearsed. Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. "I don't understand how someone can pretend to love you that deeply," she whispered. "How they can look you in the eye and still plan to use you." William's voice was quiet. "Some men mistake possession for love. It's all they know." Lila looked up at him. "And you? Did you ever love Mom that way?" The question hit harder than she intended. He stared at her for a long moment, then looked away. "I was selfish," he admitted. Your mother deserved a better man. That's why I stayed away after she died. I didn't want to ruin what was left of her memory." Her eyes softened. "You didn't ruin anything tonight," she said. "You protected me." He smiled faintly, a rare, fragile expression. "Maybe it's not too late to be a father." Outside, the city glowed against the glass like 1,000 tiny suns. Lila rubbed her belly gently. "Maybe it's not too late for any of us," she said. For the first time that night, she felt something pure. Peace. Not the kind that came from victory, but from survival. From knowing that tomorrow, when the world asked for her version of the story, she wouldn't speak from pain anymore. She'd speak from power. Because in that quiet, private room, Laya Hart didn't just escape betrayal. She reclaimed her future. While calm settled inside the private suite, chaos still reigned in the ballroom below. The press had gathered in the hotel lobby, their camera flashes strobing across the marble walls like lightning. Reporters barked questions at anyone emerging from the reception. Board members, guests, even waiters. The world had smelled blood, and the name Adrien Vale was already trending across every news platform. Upstairs, Laya Hart sat on the velvet couch, her hands folded over her belly. For the first time in hours, she could hear herself breathe. But she also knew Adrien wasn't done. Men like him never surrendered quietly. Downstairs, Adrien stood in the center of the empty ballroom, tie loosened, champagne spilled across his shirt front. His PR team huddled around him like nervous soldiers. "We have to move fast," he snapped. "We push a counter-story before the markets open." Sloane Mercer, pale and trembling, stared at her phone. "You're already on CNBC, Adrien. They played the whole recording. You're finished." He rounded on her, eyes blazing. "No one is finished until I say they are." Sloane flinched. "We can't fake our way through this anymore. The lenders froze the IPO. The board wants your resignation." Adrien's jaw tightened. "Then I'll give them a show they'll never forget." He strode toward the PR table and grabbed a glass of untouched champagne. "We release a statement saying the audio is a deep fake, that the woman I was speaking to was an imposter hired to manipulate the market. You'll draft it." Sloane's lip quivered. "Adrien, that's perjury. There are timestamps, digital traces." "Then erase them," he barked. "You're supposed to protect me, Sloane. Or have you forgotten who made you?" That last word snapped something inside her. Her trembling stopped. She straightened slowly. "You didn't make me," she said quietly. "You used me." His eyes narrowed. "Careful." But Sloane didn't stop. "You thought you could have everything. Me, the company, the money, her. You think everyone's replaceable. But you're the one who's disposable now." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, slipping out through the service corridor. She didn't notice Elise Munro's staffer watching from the shadows, phone camera still recording. Upstairs, Gabriel Chen entered the private room, his laptop open. "It's happening," he said. "Adrien's calling it a deepfake. He's trying to rewrite the story." William Hart didn't even look surprised. "Of course he is. Narcissists never accept defeat, they only rebrand it." Lila exhaled, exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. "Will anyone believe him?" Gabriel sat beside her. "Maybe a few at first, but the evidence trail is clean. Metadata, chain of custody, 3 independent verifications. He's shouting into a hurricane." William adjusted his cufflinks, expression calm. "Still, we'll make sure the hurricane drowns out his noise. Forward the proof to the board and the lenders' council." Gabriel nodded, typing rapidly. "Already done." Lila closed her eyes. She could almost hear the city outside, the muffled horns, the hum of life moving forward. For her, time felt like it had stopped. For him, it was closing in fast. Downstairs, Adrien tried calling his lawyer, but the line went straight to voicemail. His second call, to an investor friend, ended the same way. When he checked his phone again, new alerts filled the screen. Vale Tech trading suspended. Board calls emergency session. CEO accused of fraud and manipulation. The champagne glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. He stared at the mess, bubbles, shards, reflection, and for the first time realized the truth. The empire he built was crumbling, and the woman he'd underestimated was the one who pushed the first domino. Upstairs, Lila stood by the window. Manhattan shimmered below her, indifferent, endless. Her father joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "It's almost over," he said. She nodded faintly, her reflection strong but fragile in the glass. "No, Dad," she said softly. "It's just beginning." Because while Adrien was busy fighting to control the story, Laya Hart had already become the story, and the world was finally listening. The night had quieted, but Laya Hart's heart had not. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the exposure, the sudden silence, pressed against her ribs like a bruise that refused to fade. She stood by the suite window, looking down at Fifth Avenue's glittering lights. The city below was still awake, whispering secrets through the hum of traffic and wind. Behind her, her father spoke softly with Gabriel Chen near the door. "She needs closure," William said. "Not revenge. It has to end tonight." Lila turned, her face pale but steady. "Then I want to see him," she said quietly. William frowned. "Lila, no. He's dangerous right now. Cornered, unpredictable." "I'm not afraid of him anymore," she said. "I just want him to look me in the eye and face what he's done. No screaming, no cameras, just truth." Her father hesitated, then finally nodded. "The cathedral's side chapel is still open. I'll have Gabriel arrange security." Nora touched Lila's arm gently. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" Lila met her gaze, calm and certain. "Yes, I don't want to end this in a hotel suite. I want to end it where he first lied to me." 15 minutes later, a black sedan pulled quietly to the curb beside St. Patrick's Cathedral. The city's noise faded into reverent stillness as Lila stepped out, the marble steps cool beneath her heels. Inside, the chapel glowed with dim candlelight. The scent of incense hung in the air, soft and forgiving. She sat in the front pew, hands folded around the St. Christopher charm her father had given her. For a moment, she just breathed. Then she whispered to the emptiness, "You can come in, Adrien." The side door opened. Adrien Vale walked in slowly, the arrogance stripped from him. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked smaller somehow, deflated. "Lila," he said, his voice rough, "you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," she replied, her tone calm. "But here we are." He moved closer, hesitating like a man approaching a judge. "You've destroyed everything. My company, my reputation." "No," she interrupted softly. "You destroyed it yourself? I just stopped pretending not to see it." He looked at her, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "Do you hate me?" She shook her head slowly. "No, hating you would mean you still mattered. You don't." He flinched. "You don't understand how this world works. You think you can survive it without me?" "I don't need to survive your world," she said, rising to her feet. "I'm building my own." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it onto the marble rail before him. "These are the papers Gabriel drafted. Annulment on grounds of fraud. A trust fund for our child, so your name can at least do one decent thing in its existence. And a public apology, approved by legal counsel, to be released in the morning." Adrien stared at the documents as if they were foreign. "You expect me to sign this?" "I expect you to do one honest thing before this night ends," she said. "Sign it, and you walk away with a shred of dignity. Refuse, and every proof I have goes public again. Every email, every call, every secret." He stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading. "If I sign this, I lose everything." "You already have," she said quietly. "This is just the paperwork." For a long moment they stood in silence. The flicker of candlelight danced across the marble floor. Finally, Adrien picked up the Mont Blanc pen from the folder and stared at it. His hands trembled. "Why are you doing this, Lila?" he whispered. She met his eyes, steady and sure. "Because I loved you once, and now I love myself more." And as the ink met paper, the man who once owned everything finally signed away his last illusion of control. The chapel was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside and the trembling sound of a man facing the collapse of everything he'd built. Adrien Vale stared at the stack of documents in front of him. The annulment, the trust agreement, the apology drafted by counsel. And for once, he didn't know what to say. His voice, the one that used to command boardrooms and control stock prices, was gone. Laya Hart stood across from him, veil gone, eyes calm and exhausted. She wasn't angry anymore, she was beyond anger. What filled her now was clarity, the kind that comes after breaking clean from illusion. "Sign them," she said softly. "Then we can both go home." Adrien swallowed hard. "You think this fixes anything?" "No," she replied, her tone even. "It doesn't fix, it closes." The Mont Blanc pen lay between them, sleek and heavy on the marble rail. Adrien reached for it, then stopped. His reflection in the pen's silver trim caught his eye. Tired, hollow, unrecognizable. "You know what happens once this gets out," he said. Every board member, every investor, every person I ever outsmarted, they'll tear me apart. They won't have to, she answered quietly. You've already done that yourself. He exhaled shakily, pressing the pen to the paper. The first signature came slow, the sound of ink dragging across legal parchment echoing through the empty chapel. He signed the annulment, then the trust, then paused at the last document, the apology. His voice broke. This makes me a villain. You are the villain, she said, but at least now you get to be one who told the truth. He looked up, eyes wet, and for the first time that night he looked human, fragile, small, painfully real. I loved you, Lila, he whispered. I really did. She studied him quietly. Maybe you thought you did, but you loved control more. You loved winning more, and somewhere along the way, you forgot that people aren't assets. He set the pen down and ran a shaking hand through his hair. You don't know what it's like to lose everything, she smiled sadly. I do. I just didn't build my worth on it. For a long moment, they both stood still. Candlelight flickered on the marble floor. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle reminder that life was still moving forward, past this, beyond this. Finally, Adrien picked up the pen again. His voice was low, resigned. If I sign this last one, Sloane's gone. The board's gone. The empire's gone. Lila nodded. Then maybe you can start being someone real again. He looked at her for a final time, searching for mercy that wasn't there. Then he signed. The faint scratch of ink sealed his fate. When it was done, he pushed the papers toward her and let the pen roll away. Are you happy now? He asked bitterly. Lila gathered the papers, slipping them neatly into the folder. Not happy, she said. Just free. He laughed softly, a broken, hollow sound. You're stronger than I thought. No, she said gently. You're just weaker than you pretended to be. She turned to leave. Her heels clicked softly against the marble floor, echoing like a heartbeat through the quiet church. Before she reached the door, she stopped and looked back. I'll make sure the trust is filed first thing tomorrow, she said. At least one good thing will come from your name. He didn't answer. He was staring at the pen, the same Mont Blanc he'd signed 100 contracts with. It looked heavier now, poisonous in his hand. As she stepped into the cool night air, Lila tilted her face toward the city lights. The wind brushed her hair, carrying the scent of rain and freedom. Her father's car waited by the curb, engine running softly. William opened the door without a word. She slid inside, clutching the folder against her chest. It's done, she said quietly. William nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in his eyes. Then it's time to start over. Because in that chapel, under flickering light and fading vows, Laya Hart didn't just end a marriage, she ended an empire built on lies. Morning light crept across Manhattan like a soft confession. The city was already awake, but the plaza's penthouse suite, reserved for the newlyweds, sat in silence. The champagne glasses were still half full. A bouquet of wilted roses lay abandoned on the table. What had once been the stage for a billionaire's triumph was now the ruins of his empire. Downstairs, in the gilded press lounge, journalists packed shoulder to shoulder, phones in hand, waiting. Adrien Vale had requested a statement. His lawyers had begged him not to do it. His board had demanded he step down quietly. But pride, his oldest addiction, wouldn't let him hide. At precisely 10 a.m., the doors opened. Adrien walked in alone, wearing a dark gray suit that hung looser than it had the day before. His eyes were ringed with fatigue, his charm gone. The murmurs swelled, cameras flashing as he stepped behind the podium. He took a deep breath, gripping the edge as if the wood might hold him together. Good morning, he began, his voice rough. Yesterday should have been the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became a lesson I'll carry forever. The room fell still. He paused, glancing toward the back, where William Hart stood silently beside Gabriel Chen. They were not there for revenge. They were there to ensure truth didn't get rewritten. Adrien continued, voice steadier now. There's no excuse for what I did. I deceived someone who trusted me. I let ambition replace integrity. I hurt the woman who believed in me more than anyone ever did. I wish I could undo it, but all I can do is own it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the most skeptical reporters leaned forward. Adrien Vale, the man who once mocked weakness, was confessing publicly. I won't contest the recordings, he said. They're real. Every word, and the woman you all saw last night, Laya Hart, is stronger than I ever deserved. William's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. Gabriel whispered, "That's the statement she drafted. He's reading it almost word for word." Adrien took a shaky breath. "As of this morning, I've resigned from Vale Tech. I've transferred my controlling shares into a trust for our unborn child. My lawyers have filed the annulment. This is my choice. No one forced my hand." Cameras clicked rapidly, the sound filling every pause. "And finally," he said softly, "I want to apologize, not as a CEO, but as a man who forgot that power without empathy is just destruction in a suit. To Lila, I'm sorry. To those who still believe in integrity, I promise to rebuild mine from whatever's left." He stepped back from the microphone, eyes unfocused. Questions erupted immediately. Was the marriage real? Will you face legal charges? What happens to the IPO? But he didn't answer. He simply walked out, shoulders hunched, leaving a trail of stunned silence behind him. Outside, the morning sun hit his face. For the first time in his life, Adrien Vale didn't smile for the cameras. Across town, in a quiet townhouse in the Upper East Side, Lila watched the live broadcast on her iPad. Aunt Nora sat beside her, holding her hand. The baby kicked softly, as if sensing the calm after the storm. William entered the room halfway through the statement. He didn't speak until the screen went dark. "You made him tell the truth," he said. "That's something no one else ever managed." Lila nodded slowly, tears welling. "He needed to say it," she whispered. "But I didn't need to hear it. Not anymore." She turned off the device and looked toward the window, where sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains. The city outside was still loud, relentless. But it no longer frightened her. William smiled faintly. "What will you do now?" Lila placed her hand over her belly and exhaled. "Live quietly, build something honest." Because in a world built on performance, her silence was louder than his apology and far more powerful. That night, New York seemed softer. The chaos had drifted away, replaced by a stillness that only came after something big had broken. The headlines had already done their damage. Billionaire groom's betrayal exposed at his own wedding. Adrien Vale resigns after public confession. The media had feasted on it all day. But now, the noise was fading. Inside a suite at the Ritz-Carlton, Laya Hart sat on the wide window ledge, knees drawn close, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The light stretched endlessly, rivers of gold and silver cutting through the darkness. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt quiet, clean. Her father entered with 2 mugs of tea. "Chamomile," William said softly, setting one beside her. "Doctor's orders. No caffeine." She smiled faintly. "You remembered." He settled into the chair across from her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing, a pause after too many years of running from pain. "Do you regret it?" he asked finally. "Doing it all in public?" Lila considered his question. "No," she said after a long breath. "If I'd stayed silent, he would have buried me under his version of the truth. This way, it's over. The world saw it for what it was." William nodded, pride softening the lines on his face. "You handled it better than most people twice your age." "I learned from watching you," she said, "how to stand still when everything's falling apart." He chuckled quietly. "That wasn't wisdom, sweetheart. That was fear." She tilted her head. "Maybe, but fear didn't stop you from showing up when it mattered." He looked away, blinking back emotion. "I missed too much of your life, Lila. I can't fix that." "You don't need to," she said gently. "You're here now, that's enough." The door opened quietly. Aunt Nora peeked in, holding a small silver box tied with a ribbon. "You two awake?" William smiled. "Barely." Nora crossed the room and handed the box to Lila. "I kept this for years. Your mother gave it to me before she passed. She said to give it to you when you needed to remember who you are." Lila untied the ribbon, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a tiny Tiffany rattle, polished silver, engraved with the initials LH. Her breath caught. "She bought it when you were born," Nora said softly. "Said one day you'd pass it to your own child." Tears filled Lila's eyes. "She always believed I'd be strong enough." "She was right," Nora said. Lila turned the rattle over in her palm, the metal cool and reassuring. "I thought today would break me," she whispered. "But it didn't. It showed me I can survive anything." Her father rose and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Surviving is one thing," he said gently. "Living is another." She looked up at him. "Then maybe it's time to start living." He smiled. "Then promise me something." "What's that?" When the world moves on, and it will, don't let bitterness anchor you. You fought for the truth. Now let peace win. She nodded, wiping her tears. I will. Outside, the city glowed beneath the glass, restless, alive, unapologetic. But inside the suite, the world finally felt still. Lila leaned her head against the window, watching the skyline shimmer like a heartbeat. Her baby kicked softly, a reminder that tomorrow would come and she would be ready for it. Her father's voice broke the silence one last time. You know, he said softly, your mother always believed women carry more than children. They carry legacies. Lila smiled through her tears. Then I'll make ours worth carrying. Because in the quiet after the storm, Laya Hart didn't just find peace. She found purpose. Sunday morning broke clear and bright, as if New York itself had decided to start over. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of William Hart's Park Avenue townhouse, warming the hardwood floors and catching the edges of silver-framed photos that lined the shelves. Pieces of a family slowly being put back together. Laya Hart sat at the breakfast table, wearing a soft cashmere robe, sipping herbal tea. The exhaustion of the last 48 hours still clung to her, but so did something new, peace. The air was quiet except for the faint sounds of the city below, taxis, coffee carts, the rhythm of life moving forward. Aunt Nora entered with a folded newspaper. You made the front page again, she said, setting it down. The headline read, Laya Hart speaks through silence, dignity after deception. Underneath was a photo of Lila leaving the cathedral, her expression calm, her hand over her belly. Lila sighed, at least it's over. William walked in, impeccably dressed as always, but softer now. It's over publicly, he said, but privately, it's just beginning. He set a small stack of papers on the table. Your annulment's been filed, the trust is secured for the baby. Gabriel confirmed it this morning. Lila traced the edge of the documents with her fingers, then smiled faintly. Thank you, Dad, for everything. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Don't thank me, he said. You did the hard part. You chose truth when comfort would have been easier. She looked out the window at the skyline, the plaza, the cathedral, the tower that once bore Adrien's name. Do you think he'll recover? She asked. William considered. Men like him always do, financially. But morally? That takes a lifetime. Nora set down a plate of toast and fruit. Enough talk about that man. What's next for you, Lila? Lila smiled. Rebuilding. On my own terms. She reached for her iPhone, opening a note she'd written the night before. I've been thinking about starting a design studio. Something small but honest. Weddings, events, interiors. I want to help people create moments that mean something real. William's brows lifted slightly. You have the eye for it, he said. And I know a few investors who'd support it. She shook her head gently. I don't want investors. Not yet. I want it to be mine first. I'll grow it slowly. He smiled approvingly. Spoken like a true heart. On the side table sat a small Tiffany box tied with white ribbon. Lila picked it up and opened it. Inside lay the silver baby rattle Nora had given her the night before. She turned it over, tracing her initials. When I look at this, I don't see loss anymore, she said softly. I see legacy. The baby kicked, and she smiled wider. Maybe I'll name her Grace, because that's what got us through. Nora dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Your mother would have adored that. A knock sounded at the door. Gabriel stepped in, carrying a messenger bag. Sorry to interrupt, he said. I brought copies of the public statement Lila drafted, the one she wanted to post herself. Lila took the paper and read it one last time before nodding. Let's release it. It was simple, elegant, and unshakably strong. I chose truth over comfort and peace over pride. I wish no one harm, but I will protect what's mine. My child, my name, and my peace. Thank you for respecting our privacy as we begin again. Gabriel smiled. Perfect. As he left, Lila opened her laptop. Within minutes, the statement was live. The notifications poured in, messages of support, solidarity, love. But she didn't scroll. She closed the screen and exhaled deeply. William poured her another cup of tea. You just ended the story the way it should have been told, he said. Lila nodded, her eyes glistening. No, she whispered. I just began a new one. Because rebuilding doesn't mean going back to who you were. It means becoming who you were always meant to be. And so that's how this story ends. Not with revenge, but with peace. If you're still here, my friend, then maybe something in Lila's journey touched you too. Maybe you've been there. trusting the wrong person, losing yourself trying to hold everything together. But like Lila, you learned that healing isn't about erasing the pain. It's about choosing who you become after it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's what this story is really about, the quiet power of dignity, self-respect, and beginning again. So if you've ever been broken, misunderstood, or underestimated, remember, you don't need to scream your worth. Just live it. Rebuild slowly. Love yourself fiercely. Because peace is the loudest revenge. And now, before you go, if this story moved you even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and subscribe to our channel. Let's keep growing together. One story, one healing, one heart at a time. Because you and I, we're not just watching stories here. We're learning how to write our own.